This video is now in session, and today we're going to analyze once again the 2022 Senate races. So these midterm races have been a thing that we've been covering periodically, but there are some changes that we have for these races. So let's get straight into it. These are all the safe states for Republicans and Democrats. You can see that not much has changed from that perspective. And then Colorado, in terms of likely states, Colorado keeps likely as Democrat because of 2020, where Joe Biden won the state by 13.5 percentage points. And ultimately, that's it for Democrats. And then for Republicans, it's Iowa, Missouri, Ohio, and Florida. So Florida is kept as likely primarily because Marco Rubio is in a good position as a Republican and as a Cuban American to be reelected with those kinds of vote shares that Donald Trump had even better than the vote shares that Donald Trump had in 2020, just because he's able to get more of the moderate Democrat vote. For Ohio, Tim Ryan has announced that he is running, but until we see who the Republican frontrunner will be, Republicans will still be at a likely state. Iowa is in an interesting place. Iowa is likely because it isn't contingent on anything, but Chuck Grassley, who is the senator from Iowa, could either retire or he could stay for another 6 years. Now, normally that's every single senator who's up for re-election, but Chuck Grassley right now is 87 years of age, so if he ran again for another term, he would be around 95 years when he inevitably retires, or maybe, no, he's probably not going to run for another term if he's 95, but he'll be 95 by the end of his next term if he plans to run again. So that age is pretty crucial for a lot of Iowans, even though he's very, very healthy, and he's also he can still do a lot of exercises. He does a lot of push-ups. Even with that, there are people in Iowa who still think that Chuck Grassley should hand this job over to someone a little bit more young who wants more experience in politics, someone like Joni Ernst. So Chuck Grassley is in that position where he has to decide whether he wants to give the opportunity to someone else and make the Iowa seat a little bit more competitive, or if he wants to stay on and make it a practically likely state, even a safe state for Republicans, because Chuck Grassley is immensely popular with Iowans. Another state, Missouri. Missouri, this is contingent. It's contingent on one candidate, Eric Greitens, one of the Republican candidates running for the Missouri Senate to replace Roy Blunt, who announced his retirement a few months ago. So Eric Greitens, if he successfully clears through the Republican primary, this is going to be a competitive state. Eric Greitens was kicked out of Missouri governorship when he held that job because of emails showing he blackmailed other people, and as a result, there's an entire video where we explained about this. But pretty much, Eric Greitens is practically disgraced by a lot of Missourians, and if he is the Republican nominee, it can make the Missouri race much more competitive. I wouldn't say that it would become Democratic, but it would be a race competitive enough to the point where Republicans would have to divert their funding for more competitive states like Pennsylvania. So in that sense, I guess since it's contingent on like one candidate, I'm gonna keep it as safe. But if Eric Greitens does win, it will turn into lean. Moving on to the lean states. The lean states, let's start off with Republicans. For Republicans, there is only one option, and that's North Carolina. North Carolina, this is where Richard Burr is retiring. He is not going to seek re-election, but even with that, he's a Republican, by the way. But even with that, I'd still think, though, that North Carolina is at a lean state, primarily due to Donald Trump and the 2020 election, where he won that state by 1.3 percentage points. So I expect similar margins to happen in North Carolina. The problem with North Carolina Democrats is that they don't have a particular person who is able to get out the vote, who's able to get a coalition of Charlotte suburbanites, as well as Black Americans, and as well as progressive college kids in the Research Triangle. Because Democrats need all different types of voting blocks, and there hasn't been one candidate nor one person who's been able to tie those all of those like different kinds of demographics together in one election in order to win. Now that could change with this election with Cherry Beasley, but ultimately it's mainly the status quo until it's mainly the status quo for now, because North Carolina will become Democratic anyway. It's just a matter of time with people moving into North Carolina from New York and from California. So it will be a matter of time, but Democrats can accelerate it. They can accelerate that time frame if they are able to get the the get out the vote kinds of operations that Stacey Abrams had just next door in Georgia. And with speaking of Democrats, those are the Republican lean states, by the way. For Democrats, New Hampshire, Arizona, Nevada, and as well as Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania is added on, but New Hampshire keeps as lean. This is primarily contingent on Chris Sununu actually running for Senate in 2022. It is certainly possible that he could do so, and it's very viable in comparison to Eric Greitens winning the Republican primary, which is not as viable. But Chris Sununu has not denied or has not declined running for the New Hampshire Senate. So if he does do that, that would have been a massive challenger against Maggie Hassan, because Chris Sununu is very, very, very popular with his constituents. You can see here with hypothetical pollings that Chris Sununu wins in both polls, 47% here, 48% here. And in terms of the undecided, it's still pretty low compared to the other polls. So it's not really a good sign for Maggie Hassan if Chris Sununu runs. But if Chris Sununu does run, this will probably be one of the most expensive Senate races in history because of how competitive it will still be. Since it's a Democratic incumbent who might be the underdog, and Democrats usually contribute more money than Republicans, and we can see this race begin to rack up in terms of money. For Nevada and Arizona both have incumbent Democrats, and both Democrats are pretty popular with their constituents, at least the competitive constituents that switch between Democrats and Republicans time